Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Mem Daled. The Mishnah taught us Kol sheyesh lo matirin ben laadam ben lamizbech chavin alav mishum pigul. That anytime there is a sacrifice there where there is a matir, there's something that you do that will make something else permitted for consumption, either by a person or by the mizbeach, a person or the mizbeach, then one would be liable for pigul if one eats that other thing that would be consumable. So that, for example, if a regular korban, animal korban, the sprinkling of the blood is the matir. Once you sprinkle the blood for korban shelamim, then you can take the parts that are sacrificed and put them on the mizbeach, and people can eat the rest of it. But you can only do that after one sprinkles the blood. Since that has a matir and parts that can be consumed, if during any of the four services one had intention for consumption to be outside of the time, then it will be prohibited as pigul, and anyone who eats that will be liable to karet. The Gemara now is going to quote a baraita that's going to bring a source that this is true, and the source is going to be based on this pasuk here from Vayikra 7:18. Ve'im he'achol yachem b'barzel shelama bayom hashlishi lo yeraseh. If this is talking about a korban shelamim, which can be eaten for a day, a night, and a day, if it's eaten after that time on the third day, it is not acceptable. Makriboto lo yechashem pigul yihyeh v'nefesh achad mena avona tisa. This is pigul. We've discussed earlier in the Masechet that how this is not all talking about if you actually leave it over, that's notar, which is also true. If you actually leave it over the time, that's prohibited. But rather, this is talking about if someone would have intention while preparing the korban, then it is pigul and one gets karet. Now, this pasuk is only for korban shelamim. And so now we want to know, what about other korbanot? So, teno rabanan. או maybe אלא כיוסה בשלמים. מה שלמים מיוחדים נאכלים לשני ימים ולילה אחד, אף כל נאכל לשני ימים ולילה אחד. Perhaps I would say that all we can learn from this pasuk is that pigul applies to shelamim, and I can also include other things that are like shelamim. What's special about shelamim? That's eaten for 2 days and 1 night. So I'll say other things that are eaten for 2 days and 1 night. So that would be included. That would be pigul if one had improper intention. Nechal yom belayla minayin. But how would I know that something that is consumed has to be consumed within that same day that is sacrificed and that night? How do I know that there is also a law of pigul that applies to them? Talmud omar mi besar kol sheshirayim ne'echalin. From this same pasuk that says, Hey, machol yachel mi besar. You don't have to say that. You just say machol yachel. Zevach shelava. Mi zevach shelamav. What's mi besar? Kol sheshirayim nechalin. As long as there is some part of it that is left over, that's not only a matir, part of it is a matir, and then after the matir, there's part that's consumed of the flesh. Ola she'en shi'areha nechalin minayin. Fine, that's good for something that is eaten by people. But what about a korban ola where nobody is eating any of the animal? How do you know that it applies there also? Talmud omar zebach. So the other extra word here, mi bezar zebach. You could just say dimachol yachel mi shelamav. And so that teaches also a korban ola. Minayin lerabot ha'afot v'menachot ad sheni merabeh log shemen shel mesorah. From where can I derive not only birds and meal offerings and even the oil of a mesorah that's sprinkled on him, that one would be liable for pigul also if one had improper intention during the preparation, that oil even would be liable to pigul for someone who drinks it. Talmud omar asher hem makdishim li. This is from a different pasuk here in Vayikra 22. V'daber el Aharon ve'el banav v'naziru mekodshei bnei Israel. This is saying that Aharon and his children, the Kohanim, have to be careful from all kodashim. So that includes everything. V'lo yechalelu. It says the word lechalel et shem kodshi, that they are making holy. Now we're going to make a double gezerah shavah from this pasuk. V'aten notar chilul mitum'ah. So since this pasuk, we're just talking about all kinds of things that are holy, including birds and meal offerings and oil, and it says the word chilul, and then if we go to Vayikra 19, we will see that here it talks about the law of notar. And what is that talking about? Well, it says also pigul, and it says avono yisa ki kodesh Adonai chilel. So it has the word chilel here, and therefore we can learn from chilul in this pasuk in 22 to the word chilul here that applies to notar as well. And furthermore, it's going to apply to pigul from the gezerah shava of the word avon. It says the word here avon, and back in our pasuk it says avon, also avonatisa, and therefore I can learn all the laws about pigul, whatever we know about korban shelamim from this pasuk, we will apply also to other types of offerings, even oil. Now we ask, since we're going to end up including everything in the law of pigul, even meal offerings and the oil of a mesorah, why is the original pasuk only about shelamim? Why didn't the pasuk say anything that's kodesh, pigul applies to? Lomar lecha ma shelamim miuchadim sheyesh lehem matirin ben laadam ben lamizbeach, av kol sheyesh lo matirin ben laadam ben lamizbeach chayavin alehen mishum pigul. Oh, that's coming to say that it's not everything in the world. Only something that is like shelamim. In what way is shelamim special? In that you have to do something in order to matir the other things. You have to sprinkle the blood so that you will have part of it that is consumable by people and part that's consumable by the mizbeach. So too, pigul only applies to things where there is a matir, and whether that matir will make it consumable for people or for the mizbeach. It might be a korban olah where it's only for the mizbeach. Okay, but fine, it has a matir and it has a consumable part, then one is liable for pigul. Here's some examples. Ha'olah dama matir b'esral mizbeach v'odah lakohanim. Korban olah, the blood will make permissible the meat for the mizbeach, and the skin, the hide, goes to the Kohanim, but only after that matir. Olah ta'of dama matir b'sara l'mizbeach. Or korban olah, that's a bird. Once you sprinkle the blood, then you can put the rest on the mizbeach. Chatat ta'of dama matir b'sara l'kohanim. A korban chatat from a bird, you have to also sprinkle the blood in order for the rest of the flesh to be permitted to the Kohanim. Parim anisrafim musrim anisrafim dama matir emurehen li karev. And parim and se'irim, that their blood is sprinkled inside the hechal, on the inner mizbeach, and then some of it is burnt on the outside mizbeach, and the rest of it is burnt outside the Bet HaMikdash altogether. That also has a matir, because once you sprinkle the blood on the inside, then you can sacrifice the emurim, the parts that are put on the mizbeach. ומוציא אני את הקומץ ואת הלבונה והקטורת ומנחת כהנים ומנחת כהן משיח ומנחת נסכים והדם. This will exclude the items that we mentioned in our Mishnah, where the entirety of that thing is burnt. It is itself a matir. The kometz, that's the matir for the rest of the flour, and so is that lebona. Ketoret is all burned. Minchat korban mincha that a kohen brings is entirely burnt, and also the korban mincha that the kohen gadol brings twice a day is entirely burned, and korban mincha, or the wine libations that come along with a korban, which are entirely placed on the mizbeach, and the dam, which is itself a matir for other things. And so none of these things are consumable after a matir. They are either the matir themselves and or they are entirely burnt on the mizbeach, and therefore these are not like the korban shelamim, and the law of pigul does not apply to them. Even if one had intention for pigul during preparation, if one eats those things themselves, then one does not get karet for pigul. Rabbi Shimon omer, ma shelamim miuchadim sheyesh bo al mizbeach hachitzon ve'chavin alav af kol sheyeshnan al mizbeach hachitzon hachison chayvin alav mishum pigul. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. We saw in a short way his disagreement yesterday, but here's the long form. He says, just like a korban shelamim is special in that the blood is sprinkled on the outside mizbeach and one is liable to pigul, so too only korbanot where the matir of the blood is sprinkled outside, on the outside mizbeach, then one is liable to pigul. Yasu parim anisrafim usim anisrafim ho'il she'en al mizbeach hachison kishlamim en chayvin alav mishum pigul. That will exclude the pad and sa'ir, for example, on Yom Kippur, where those are burnt in the blood is sprinkled on the inside, and then some of it is on the mizbech, and the rest is burnt outside of the mikdash altogether, because they are not sprinkled. The blood is not sprinkled on the outside mizbech as shelamim is. There's no liability of pigul for someone who eats them. That's the end of the baraita. Let's analyze further. Amar mor kayoseh bishlamim ma'nihu. Well, so when it says other things that are like shlamim that are eaten for 2 days and 1 night, those would be included just based on comparison of shlamim. What is that? Bechor denechal shnei yamim v'layla echad. If the firstborn animal you give to the kohen, and the kohen should sacrifice it, and he can eat it for 2 days and 1 night. So if one had improper intention, that would be pigul, because just like shlamim. Now, how are you including bechor? Maybe it's from memasinu, which means that we just use a paradigm. It's the same thing. The Torah talked about shelamim, and this is the same as shelamim. So that's the comparison. We're just including it through this, just like this. So too that as a paradigm, but it has to be the same. But here it's not the same. Korban shelamim, you have to put your hands on the animal. Not so for a bechor, and it also requires other libations that you bring with the shalamim, not so for bechor. And for shalamim, you have to wave the breast and the thigh, and you don't have to do that for a bechor, and therefore that would be reason not to apply this law of pigul to bechor. So it can't be we're learning from memasinu, ela me'im he'achol ye'achel. Oh, we're learning it from these words here, im he'achol ye'achel, bayom hashilishi pigul. Actually, this one, va'im ha'achol ye'achel, the original pasuk that we brought regarding korban shelamim and the law of pigul. So he'achol is a kalal, anything that eaten. Ye'achel is also a kalal. And we're going to read this as a klal ukelal, and then it says shelamam, then a shelamim offering, which is a perat. So we're going to treat this as if it's a klal uprat uklal, even though it's not in the right order, which we will ask about in a second. Anyway, klal uprat ukelal, you learn not only the perat, which is shelamim, but also things that are similar to it, and so that would include bechor, which is also 2 days and 1 night. So that's how we're learning it from a klal uprat ukelal. Now, hani tere kelal. Now we ask, it's not a klal uprat uklal. The two klals are right next to each other. It's a klal uprat. That's not the same, is it? Amarava kedamari be'amarava kol makom she'ata moseh shnei chelalot hasimuchim ze lazeh hatel perat benehem vedunem bechlal uprat. Rava says actually in the West, in Eretz Israel, they have a rule that anytime you see 2 klals in a row, why would you have 2 klals in a row? Why do you need him he'achol ye'achel? So this might be considered a double language in the school of Rabbi Akiva, and he will learn something as a ribui. But klal uprat ukelal is from the school of Rabbi Ishmael, and so he also says, even though it generally says we don't dibrat Torah kilshon bnei adam, and you don't necessarily learn something from double language, but here we're treating it as 2 kelals, and if you have 2 klals in a row, then that means that you should consider it as if it's a kelal, and take the prat and put it between them, and have another kelal, and therefore we can learn from here that you should include a bechor as well. Now we go back to the Baraita and analyze this line that says, how do you know that one is liable to pigul, not only in shelamim, but also other korbanot, and even the oil that is brought by the mesorah, if one had improper intention, and then someone consumes that oil, they are liable karet for pigul. Hamaneh Rabbi Meir hi. Well, it sounds like this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and therefore this entire baraita. would be the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Detanya, log shemen shel mesorah chavin alav mishum pigul, Rabbi Meir. And another braita, Rabbi Meir is the one that says that the oil of the mesorah, if one had improper intention beforehand and sometime during the preparation, we'll see exactly at what point, then it becomes pigul. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And others disagree. However, at the end of the braita, it listed a bunch of things for which one is not liable to pigul, and among them it said we are going to exclude the korban, the mincha, and the libations, the wine libations that come along, that accompany an animal sacrifice, and also the blood. Now, Nisachim, that is not the opinion of Rabbi Meir, but rather Rabbanan. And how do we know that? The Tanya. Niske behema chavin alehem mishum pigul bepnei shedam hazevach matiran likarev. Divrei Rabbi Meir. In this braita, it's Rabbi Meir that says that the wine libations that come along with an animal sacrifice, one is liable if one consumes that wine as pigul, if during the preparation of the animal one had in mind to consume it after the time, then the wine libation is prohibited as pigul, and someone who drinks it will be liable to karet. Why? Because the blood of the sacrifice is a matir and permits then the wine to be sacrificed, to be poured onto the mizbeach, and so therefore there is a matir. And this is the consumable part, so it's included in pigul. Amiru lo v'halo adam ebi et zebachav hayom unsachim mikan ad asara yamim. But the other sages say it can't be connected to the sacrifice, to the blood as a matir, because one is permitted to bring the animal today, and the libations that accompany it, they could bring it 10 days later, anytime later. Now, if it's a matir, that would have to be on the same day. You could only do matir, now you could do it. That would only be connected if it was on the same day. The fact that you can bring it on a separate day means that the wine libation is completely independent, does not have a matir, and therefore is not subject to pigul. Amar lehen afani lo amarti ela bebain oim hazebach. Rabbi Meir says, I agree. If you bring it the next day, the day after, 10 days later, then indeed the pigul would not apply to the wine. When I said that one is liable to pigul for the wine libations, I meant only if it is brought together with on the same day as the korban. Anyway, the point is that according to Rabbanan, the nesachim never are pigul. According to Rabbi Meir, sometimes it is pigul. But in the baraita, at the end, it said nesachim are totally out, which means it's excluding them altogether, which is the opinion of Rabbanan against Rabbi Meir. So now we have a problem, because the beginning of the baraita is Rabbi Meir, the end of the baraita is Rabbanan. Amar Rav Yosef, Hamaner bihi. Rav Yosef says, actually, we could say that the entire baraita is the opinion of Rabbi, who partially agrees with Rabbanan regarding the wine, but he agrees with Rabbi Meir when it comes to the oil. And so the whole baraita could be him. Damar, log shemen shel mesorah matenotav sharule, umede matenotav sharule, matenotav mefageli le. Because Rabbi said that when it comes to the oil of the mesorah, its placement, meaning the placement of the oil, is what makes it permitted to drink the rest of it. Once you sprinkle the oil towards the kodesh, then the kohanim can consume the rest of it, as opposed to the blood. It's not the blood of the asham that the mesorah brings. That's not what makes it a matir, but rather the oil itself. And therefore, it has, even if you do it on a different day than the korban, it has a matir, and it has a consumable part. And so, since its placements make it permitted, so then it will also cause it to be pigul, and the remainder that is consumed will become pigul. How do you know that Rabbi says that? Tanya. Log shemen shel mesorah mo'alin bo ad she'yizrok hadam. Nizrak hadam lo nehenin velo mo'alin. Tanakama says that this oil of the mesorah, it is, if one consumes it before sprinkling the blood, one would commit me'ilah. That would not be allowed. Once you sprinkle the blood of the asham, then while lechatechila, you still cannot partake of it until you do the sprinkling of the oil itself, but one will not do me'ilah, will not commit me'ilah. You see that according to Rabbanan, it's the blood that turns it from being me'ilah to not me'ilah. So the blood is the key thing, and the blood offering is true. You need the blood offering so that you can go to the next step, but actually the oil could be done on a different day than the asham, and so you would not say that the blood is a matir. And so since it doesn't have a matir on a different day, so Rabbanan would say we don't consider the blood to be a matir, and therefore the oil is not going to be subject to pigul. Rabbi Omer, mo'alin ad sheyiten matenotav, v'shavin she'asur b'achila ad sheyiten matan sheba umatan behonot. Rabbi Udas Anasi says that one would commit me'ilah until you sprinkle the oil itself. It's not dependent on the blood, but rather on the oil itself being sprinkled. And Rabbi agrees that one is not permitted to consume the oil until one takes the oil and sprinkles it 7 times and puts it on the big thumb and the big toe of the mesorah. So we see that according to the B, in all cases of the oil, doesn't matter which day you do it, even if it's not on the day of the korban, it's the matir is the sprinkling of the oil itself, and then the rest of it is something consumable. And therefore, since it has a matir and a consumable part, it is subject to pigul. And so there you go. Rabbi could be the author of our Mishnah, because he says that the oil of a mesorah is going to be subject to pigul, which is like Rabbi Meir. On the other hand, Rabbi agrees with Chachamim when it comes to the wine libations, and so we have an answer. Amaru ha kamed Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Gabra Rabba Rav Yosef Lema Ki Hai Milleta. And so this answer of Rav Yosef was repeated to Rabbi Yirmiyah, and he says, I can't believe that a great person like Rav Yosef would say this answer. I have a problem with it. Look at the case of the oil that is brought on a separate day, not together with the asham, where everybody agrees that you need to do the sprinkling of the oil first, and so that you can consume it. And yet everyone agrees that if one did do the sprinkling with having intention to consume it in the wrong day, still it would not be pigul. And you know who agrees with that? The Chachamim and even Rabbi Meir. Tanya log shemen shel mesorah chayvin alav mishum pigul mipnei shedam matiro libhonot. Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir teaches that when it comes to the oil of the mesorah, if one had a wrong intention when preparing the korban, then if one consumes the oil, it would be liable to pigul, because the sprinkling of the blood is what permits one to use the oil, according to Rabbi Meir. Amirulo Rabbi Meir v'halo adam but the other sages tell Rabbi Meir, wait a second, how can you connect the oil to the blood offering? After all, one is permitted to bring his asham today, and then the mesorah can bring his log of oil even 10 days later. So how can you say, oh look, the blood is the matir for the oil, if it's born on a different day, it has nothing to do with it. And Rabbi Meir says, oh, when I said that one is liable to pigul for oil, that's only if it's brought on the same day. Then they are connected. But you're right, if they're on a different day, they're not connected. And so that means on a different day, although you have to do the sprinkling of the oil first, and then you can consume it, and so in that sense it's a matir, but it's still, even Rabbi Meir would say one is not liable to for pigul for that. And therefore, Rabbi, who said one is liable to pigul in that case, is not answering for Rabbi Meir. And therefore, you cannot use Rabbi to answer this question of the Baraita, that half of it is Rabbi Meir and half of it is not Rabbi Meir. Ela amar Rabbi Yirmiyah le'olam Rabbi Meir hi useme mikan nesachim. So Rabbi Meir says, I have a different answer. We can say that the entire Baraita is Rabbi Meir. And therefore, the beginning of it that says that the oil is pigul, that's talking about a case where it is in fact on the same day. And the end of it, where it says, it includes nisachim, that is not liable to pigul, erase that word, because according to Yirmiyah, if the blood offering is on the same day, then it would be liable to pigul. Amar Abaye le'olam la tismeh v'tana log haba im ha'asham v'hu adin l'nesachim abim im hazebach v'hadar tana nesachim abim bifnei asman v'hu adin le'log haba bifnei lifnei atzmo. Abaye says, no, you can leave in the word nesachim. And here's how you'd read the Baraita. In the beginning of the Baraita, it talks about the oil and that one is liable. Well, that's talking about assuming a case where the oil is brought on the same day as the asham. And the truth is that would be also true if it was a wine libation brought on the same day as the korban there. And if it's brought on the same day, we consider the blood, placement of the blood of that korban to be a matir for the oil and for the wine libation. And therefore, if one had pigul intention during the preparation of the korban, one would be liable to karet for consuming the oil or the blood. And then the end of the Braita is talking about a case where that wine libation was brought on a separate day. And that would include also the oil if it was brought on a separate day. So when it says exclude the wine libations, that's when it's brought on a separate day, where one would not be liable to pigul. And in that reading, the entirety of the Mishnah, of the Baraita, can be according to the Bi Meir. Hatat ta'of dama matiret besara la kohanim. Back to the Mishnah that taught that when you have a korban chatat, that's a bird, the blood that is put onto the mizbeach will be a matir, so that the kohanim can eat the rest of the bird. Since you have a matir and something that can be consumed, therefore, if one has improper intention while preparing that bird, then that meat will become pigul, and someone who eats it will get karet. We ask, what's the source of it? It's from the following Baraita that was taught by Levi. And now we're going to quote the whole Baraita. The Baraita is a midrash on this pasuk that is talking about the gifts that one gives to the Kohen. And it says among them, Hashem says, I'm giving to, it says to Aaron, I'm giving to you and your children, of things that are kodesh kodashim, that are on the fire, from the fire, kol korbanam, lechol minchatam, lechol chatatam, lechol ashamam, asher yashibuli, kodesh kadashim lecha, hu ulbanecha. And so this comes to include all the offerings, all the meal offerings, sin offerings, guilt offerings, which they shall render to me, shall be most holy for you and for your sons. So you see that it's coming to include a list of items where some part of it is given to the Kohanim. So there's going to be a matir, and then the rest of it will be given to the Kohanim. And so now let's go through this. Kol korbanam, when it says all of the sacrifices, l'rabot log shemen shel mesorah, that comes to include the log of oil that a mesorah brings. After you do all the sprinklings that are needed, the rest of it is permitted to be consumed by the Kohanim. And that's included in the word kol of korbanam. Sakadatecha mina min ha'esh katab rachamana v'hai lav motar min ha'eshu kamash malan. Why would I think not so? Because the same pasuk says from the fire. So I might have thought only things where part of it is burned on the fire, then another part of it can be eaten by kohanim. And this, the oil is not put on the fire at all, and therefore teaches us this is included also among the things that the Kohanim will get some of. L'chol minchatam, l'rabot minchat omer minchat hakenaot. Why I say to all mincha offerings? That comes to include even the korban ha'omer that we bring from barley on the second day of Pesach, to permit now the crops to be used, and also the mincha that a sotah offers. Salkadatecha mina v'achelu otam asher kupar bahem, uminchat ha'omer latir atya, uminchat kenot lebarer avon ka'atya, kamash malan. I need this pasuk here in Bemidbar to teach me that, because from the pasuk in Shemot, it says regarding the korban mincha that the kohanim will eat that which they get atonement for, from those things that are used for atonement. So I might have thought that only korban mincha that's used for atonement, the kohanim can eat, but minchat ha'omer is not to atone for anything. They didn't do anything wrong to have to bring korban ha'omer, but rather that barley is brought in order to permit the new grain. And the korban of the sotah is brought in order to see whether she is guilty or not. It's in order to clarify the transgression. It is not itself for atonement. So I might have thought that maybe these korbanot are not included in Asher Kupar Bahem and cannot be eaten, and therefore Luchot Minchatam says no. These also, the part of it can be eaten by the Kohanim. Ulchol Chatatam Rabot Chatat Ha'of. All the Chatat offerings that comes to include the bird. Why do I need to know that? If generally korban chatat, if it's an animal, the kohanim can eat part of it. Because I might have thought that the bird is a nevela. You don't do shechita on a sacrificial bird. Instead, milika, by pinching the back of the neck, and so that would not be kosher if you just did that outside the mikdash. It would be a nevela. But in the Bet Mikdash, that's a special way to offer it instead of shechita, and since that's the way to do it, the kohanim actually can eat it, which is quite an amazing thing, that they're eating something that does not get regular shechita. L'chol ashamam ledabot asham nazir asham mesora sakada techamina lachshir kaatu kamashmalan. All asham offerings, I need that phrase in the pasuk to include the asham that a nazir brings and the mesora brings, because I might have thought that only an asham that's brought for a sin, as a sin offering for someone that made a transgression, then the kohanim can eat part of it. But maybe not these, because these are brought so that they can fulfill their obligations, so that they can finish their period of tum'ah and then be able to come to the mikdash again and eat sacrifices. So, because this is only to allow them to go to the next step, but it's not because of a sin that they did, a nazir, he didn't do a sin, nor a mesora, and therefore I might have thought not. Therefore, Hashem comes to teach that the Kohanim also eat part of those Asham sacrifices. Asham mesora behedya ketibe. Hold on. Asham mesora, the pasuk says explicitly, Vayikra 14:13, the sin offering is a priest, and so is the guilt offering. So that means part of it goes to the Kohen. So actually, I don't need it for the mesora. And the answer is you're right. Ela l'rabot Asham nazir ka Asham mesora. This phrase of Chol Hashamam is coming to include only the Asham of a nazir, who didn't do anything wrong, that meat is eaten by the Kohanim just like that of a Mesora. Asher yashivu ze gezel hager lecha hu shelecha yiyeh afilu lekadesh bo et haisha. Asher yashivu, which they shall give to me. This is referring to someone who steals from a convert, and then the convert dies and he has no heirs. Now this thief, who's he going to return that money to? Is nobody? He's the original owner is gone, nor does he have any heirs. And the answer is he gives it to the Kohanim. And he adds a fifth to it. So that's given to the Kohanim, and as Pasuk says, Lechayu, it's yours. It's totally yours. You can do it with it whatever you want. The Kohen can even use it to do Kiddushin, and then he'll be married. Now, Kiddushin has to be done with something that is his own property. And so, even though it's being granted to him by the Torah, it's not like it's just a holy thing that he can use, but rather it is his personal property. Tanya, Rabbi Elazar Omer Mishum Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, Pigel b'dabar hanasa b'chutz, Pigel b'dabar hanasa b'fnim, lo Pigel. In the Mishnah, we had a machloket between Tanna Kama that said, for bulls and goats that the blood is sprinkled inside the hechal, inside the kodesh, those are still subject to pigul. Rabbi Shimon disagreed and said, no, only has to be like shelamim, just like shelamim, the blood is offered on the outside mizbeach, so too, pigul only applies to something where the blood is offered on the outside of mizbeach, and that excludes the inner korbanot. But now we have a third opinion that's somewhere in between of Rabbi Elazar in the name of Rabbi Yosef. He says if someone had pigul intention for something that is offered outside, then it is pigul. Meaning when he's outside, and let's say he's doing shechita, which you do outside, and you have in mind too that you're going to do something that is also done outside, after the time, then it is pigul. But if while he's outside, he has in mind that he's going to do after the time, something that is done inside, then it is not pigul. We'll give an example. Kesad. Haya omed bachutz v'amar, hareni shochet lehazot midamo lemachar lo pigel. Shemachshava bachutz b'davar hanasa bifnim lo pigel. If he's standing outside doing the shechita, and he says, I am doing shechita with the intention that I'm going to sprinkle the blood tomorrow. Now, where do you sprinkle the blood of an inner korban? You do it in the inside of the hechal, in the kodesh, on the mizbach hapinimi. In that case, it does not make it pigul, because intention that is thought of while doing an outside action like shechita will not make pigul if your intention is about something that you will do inside, meaning the sprinkling of the blood, which is inside. So that's no pigul. Haya omed bifnim ve'amar hareni mazeh al menat leaktir emurim v'tishpoch shirayim lemachar lo pigel shemachshava bifnim bedavar hanasa bachutz. Another example where it's not pigul is, let's say the Kohen is inside and he's doing the sprinkling of the blood inside. And he says, I am sprinkling this blood with intention that I am going to burn the inner parts or to pour the leftover of the blood. Both of those are done on the outside mizbeach. I'm going to do that tomorrow. Also not pigul, because he's doing an action inside, and while he's doing that action, he's having intention that he will do something in the wrong time that is done outside. And so those do not join together, and therefore not pigul. Aval hayomed bachutz v'amar hareni shochet lishpoch shirayim lemachar, or leaktir emurim lemachar, pigel shemachshava bachutz b'davar hanasa bachutz. However, if he is standing outside and doing shechita, and he has in mind, I'm doing shechita with intention that I will pour the rest of the blood on the base of the mizbeach tomorrow, or I will burn the sacrificial portions tomorrow, that is pigul, because there he's doing an action outside and has the intention while doing an outside thing related to another outside action. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Ma'ikera kasher yuram mishor zebach hashelamim v'chi ma lamadu mishor zebach hashelamim me'ata. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, what is the source of it? It's from the pasuk in Vayikra 4 that has to do with the korban hatat of the Kohen Gadol. And it says there that Yuram, it will be, and it is taken off from the bull of the peace offering. It's comparing this Korban Hatat of the part of Kohen Gadol to a Zebach Shelamim. Well, what are we learning from a Zebach Shelamim? It says all the things that you're supposed to do with that par. So what are we learning that I wouldn't know otherwise? Ela makish par Kohen Mashiach leshor Zebach HaShelamim. Ma shor Zebach HaShelamim ad shihu ma'asav u'machshevotav al mizbeach hachison. Af par Kohen Mashiach ad shihu machshevotav u'ma'asav al mizbeach hachison. So we're making a comparison that the par Kohen Mashiach, which is an inner korban, the blood is sprinkled on inside of the mikdash. We're comparing that to a shelamim where everything is done outside. So just like with the Zebach Shelamim, where in order to become pigul, you'd have to have the action and the thoughts are all regarding Mizbeach HaChitzon, that you're doing something outside and having in mind that you will do something also outside at the wrong time. So too, Par Kohen Mashiach, it does not become pigul unless he is having intention and doing an action regarding the outside Mizbeach, and not if he intends to sprinkle inside in the wrong time while he's doing Shechita, or sprinkling inside, having intention that he's going to put the sacrificial portions on the outside mizbeach at the wrong time. And so this is where we learn it from that comparison. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Abu Amar Rav, Halacha k'Rabbi Elazar, Shamar mishum Rabbi Yoseh. Rav Nachman, in the name of Rabba Baruch, says name of Rav, the halacha follows this opinion of Rabbi Elazar in the name of Rabbi Yoseh. Amar Rabba Hilchata Lemshicha. Rabba says a famous line: are you give Pesach halacha for the times of Mashiach? What do you mean Pesach halacha? Like, this is going to happen tomorrow? That someone's going to have this intention of an inside or an outside? We don't have a Bet HaMikdash. Why do you need to tell me the halacha for the times of Mashiach? Amar le'Abaye ela me'ata kol shechitat kodashim lalitne hilchatat limshicha hu. Abaye says, okay, according to that, all the laws of the shechita of kodashim, this whole masechet Zevaḥim, we should not bother learning, because all of it is only halacha for the time of Mashiach. So you're going to tell me we shouldn't learn it? But we do learn it. Why? Rather, you learn it and you receive reward for it. So too here, when Rav said halacha could be al-azar, he wasn't saying that we're practically going to do it. He's saying we should discuss it and we will receive reward. There's many lessons. This is important Torah that we need to know for itself. There's important ideas here, and so we do it for its own sake, and even if it's not practical right now. And Rava responds, well, I know, of course we learn these laws theoretically for the lekabel sachar, but what I was asking that is, why do you have to say the halacha is? Right? Tell me, this is this opinion gets it from there. We want to derive the pisukim, we want to understand these pisukim, and we want to understand the reasonings and implications of all the opinions. But what I was asking is, I wasn't asking why you're learning this at all. I was asking why you're giving a pesak halacha or another variation of the words instead of halacha lamali halacha ka'amina. I was asking you why you're saying the actual pesak halacha lemaaseh. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.